great speakers today. One's Dr. Steve Ambrose and the other's Patricia Del Valle. They're going to be speaking to you today on child abuse.
My name is Steve Ambrose, and I work at a place called Children's Institute, where we specialize in working with kids who've been sexually abused, physically abused, all different forms of...
Mario, are you okay? Is there something wrong?
Just leave me alone.
Mario, stop. What's the matter? Mario, what's wrong? Mario, what's wrong?
People experience all kinds of fears, usually because of a whole array of misconceptions associated with what child abuse is, what's going to happen as a result of a report. And in my experience, none of those really occur, or very few of them occur.
Reporting child abuse is not as simple as it seems because, in most cases, you are dealing with human beings who are familiar to you, such as your student, child, husband, or colleague. Familiarity causes people to hesitate, become ambivalent, and to conveniently perpetuate myths and misconceptions about reporting outcomes. The only persons unfamiliar to the reporter are the folks at the hotline, law enforcement, and social workers who come and snatch the child away. Listen to two teachers and a social worker express common myths about abuse reporting. Our experts respond to some of these misconceptions and offer advice. Myth number 1. Reporters will face reprisals from angry parents if they find out.
I'm just afraid some parents going to come back to my house or to school or where I'm working and come and try to beat me up or something after I report.
Yeah, like throw the rocks through the window with a note on it.
Yeah.
You're next, I know.
I abuse my kid, I'm going to abuse you now.
There are a lot of fears that prohibit reporting, that interfere with a mandated reporter going ahead and picking up that phone and making a call. The most prevalent one probably is retaliation, that here is an out-of-control person who is going to possibly attack me, and that I'm in harm's way. I'm at risk for making this type of report. As a matter of fact, in all the years that I've been working in the issue of child abuse, I don't know of one situation where there has been physical retaliation against a mandated reporter, against a person who's made a child abuse report. It's an unfounded fear. There's more retaliation against the teacher who benches a child or gives them a low grade than there is against a teacher who reports child abuse.
Reporting information is kept confidential, so the Child Protection Agency can't release information about who made a mandated report. And so in most situations that information is protected. The parent may have suspicions, but they don't actually know who has made the report. And in general, there aren't reprisals by the parents.
I think reporters do have some fear of reprisals, but there have been very few incidents of that. Again, in New Jersey, I think getting people to the table right away with the parents to discuss it as a team keeps the parents from focusing on who made the report, which is not really the issue. The issue is this report true or not, and is there some help we can provide?
We have situations, certainly in Los Angeles County, where the alleged perpetrator has a very violent history. I mean, we have gang members, we have a variety of people who do have histories of acting out against people, and I think that care needs to be taken with reporters to make sure that when they make the report in, that they are providing accurate information.
The second type of fear when it comes to retaliation is against the child. Is this child going to be hurt even more because now there's a child abuse report? And again, that is unfounded. Certainly there are situations where children are retaliated against, but the chances of the abuse escalating, the chances of a child continuing to be hurt are much, much greater if a report is not made than if a report is made.
Myth number 2. Reporters will face lawsuits or lengthy legal battles if they report.
Well, I'm also afraid that I'm going to be called into court and be sued for all this money because I report, and who's going to protect me?
I'm sure there's probably laws against that, though. I mean, the police and community want you to say something.
Yeah, but there's no guarantees. And, that's my money, that's my career.
Yeah, who's to protect you if you're doing the right thing? I mean, the parents do have rights also. I mean, they can come after you.
Well, it's different if you were just to make something up, but if you have reason, I think, you should help the kid first. It'd be your first concern.
In New Jersey, and I believe in every state, reporters are indemnified, meaning that they made a report in good faith, then they are not subject to lawsuit. Good faith really means that you did suspect abuse or neglect, not that you just called in order to harass someone.
Wow. Is there any place else where he's hit you?
No.
Or that you have any bruising or scars or marks?
A mandated reporter is not called in to testify. Again, they are seen as protected. So the information about the circumstances of the report may be shared with the court, but not the mandated reporter, and generally not the kind of detail that would identify the mandated reporter. But they are rarely, if ever, called in to actually testify.
The court system is an excellent ally. Anybody that's been through counseling or has worked as a counselor knows that real clinical change is not easy. It involves looking at some really ugly parts of ourselves, and real change can hurt. Many clinicians have come to the point to understand that when a family is involved with abuse and neglect, a little support from the court to keep the family involved in treatment when the treatment becomes painful or uncomfortable is a very necessary and helpful tool. If you live in a state where paperwork is required along with a report and you think that it's going to be too cumbersome, you need to stop and realize that the amount of time it's going to take to possibly save or definitely change a child's life is minuscule compared to what the impact is going to be.
Myth number 3. Reporting will not have a meaningful impact on the child. The system is ineffective.
I heard this other therapist and social worker who made a report, and the social worker came out and didn't do anything.
Really?
So then the therapist and the social worker looked bad, but
But what about the poor kids? I just don't get how the kids need help. That's the hard part. They need help.
It's probably worth the risk if you ask somebody. Chances are they'll do something, but you're right. There's probably
Generally speaking, only 1/3 of the calls received nationally rise to the level to warrant a full-blown investigation and service plan. The term of art is substantiated. When a teacher or a member of the public makes a report and the case is not substantiated, they may wonder or believe that nothing was done for this family. For confidentiality reasons, reporters are generally not going to hear back, and that's part of the process.
We really want to get into the front end of a problem. We would like to be called in so that we can support a family and we can preserve a family and we can keep them together and give them what they need, whether it's preventative mental health services for parents or domestic violence services, substance abuse issues, whatever it is, poverty levels. And we would really just like to support the family and keep them together. So I understand that stereotype is out there, and we're doing our best within the department to change that.
Myth number 4. The system separates children from their families, causing more harm than the abuse or neglect inflicted by the caregiver.
Well, one thing I'm thinking though, if it could do more harm to the kid because the kid would be pulled away from the family and it'd be without his parents, which in the long run would hurt the child even more, right?
And I've heard of kids who get taken out of their parents' home and get more harmed at their new placements. So
yeah, so maybe it'd be better not to say anything at all.
Oftentimes people are afraid to make a report because they buy into the myth that all Child Protective Services want to do is snatch kids away and put them in foster care. That is so not the case. The overwhelming objective in Child Protective Services is family reunification. Only in the most dire circumstances, when a child is really, really at grave risk, will they be removed, and most removal is very, very short term. It is the rare child that ends up in foster care due to an abuse or neglect situation.
And New Jersey, like every other state, must show that we made every reasonable attempt to keep the child at home, including a vast array of services to keep the child safe. Even when a child is removed from the home, first and foremost, the goal is to reunify. How can we get the child back with his or her parent safely? Second of all, we look for relatives first. Although we have an excellent foster parent program, there are never going to be enough foster parents to handle all the kids that need placement. So we count on relatives who have backgrounds that we can clear as being safe for the kids, relatives who have space in their home and in their heart to take care of the children. So we try to keep them with relatives so they can maintain contact with their parents and they can be reunified. Again, the vast majority of children, except for those seriously injured, the goal is to return home right from the beginning.
One family I was involved in, we had suspicions of drug use with both parents, mother and father. Mother was a little hesitant to supply any information about extended family members, but I was able to get the maternal grandmother's information. I made a couple collateral calls. I was able to get the maternal grandmother involved. She, at one point, said that she would be able to visit the home around the same time that I'd be responding to the home. The evening that I came to the home, the parents were being locked out. They were being evicted. They had 3 small children. Grandmom showed up with her car with 3 car seats. She was able to take the children. We did what we call a relative placement. The children didn't have to go into foster care. They didn't have to be removed. Grandmom was excellent. She was a registered nurse. She passed all our criteria as far as becoming an approved caretaker for these children. And the parents were then allowed to get into substance abuse training. They had the freedom not to worry about the responsibility of their children. They were able to go and do what they needed to do to get healthy and know that the children were with a supportive family member.
I feel she has insufficient information to file allegations of sexual abuse against the mom. What she is saying is that the father is often away on trips and she feels lonely.
Okay.
And she often has her child sleep with her on her bed.
Okay.
She likes to cuddle with him.
Mm-hmm.
And she starts off by putting the child to bed in his own bedroom, but eventually he ends up in her bed.
I'm here to tell you, most of the time I spend in my office is on the phone with agencies, getting them to get involved, not to not take the child out of the home. They're very cautious, and that's good. That's good. They're the ones who want to be sure before they move to remove a child from parents or from their home. So that the children that are removed, rest assured, cannot say 100% of the time, but I would certainly say upwards of 95% of the time are abused children and are usually seriously abused children.
Myth number 5. Factor in the influences of religion, culture, and lifestyle to determine abuse.
Some people, that's the way they discipline their child, though. I mean, who's to say that they're right or wrong? If it's their culture and their religion and the way they've done things for years.
And they're the ones that are going to be held responsible for what their children do. So if they don't discipline them, then it's going to go right back to them anyway. So.
Okay, but you understand there's got to be a line drawn from where abuse goes overboard, where it becomes an injury, and that child, I mean, you can break a leg by whipping a kid. They're fragile.
Well, that's true.
Certainly, Los Angeles County is probably the most diverse community in the world, and so you have different parenting styles. There are practices that are generations old from ethnic groups or from racial groups in this community that vary because of cultural histories and so forth. The line that we draw is generally a line of where the child is injured, and so physical discipline of a child, spanking, that's not child abuse. And it will not be identified as child abuse by our agency. If a child is injured, in other words, if the child is hit with a belt and marks are left on their back, that crosses a line.
Cultural issues are divided 2 ways. We do not believe that culture should affect the issue around whether a child is safe. It doesn't matter what culture you're in. Safety is kind of the ultimate. It is paramount. Is this child going to be badly hurt without our intervention? Where culture comes in 2 other ways. One is how you respond to those safety issues that have been identified. Culture can greatly impact the type of response you give to that. The other way is in service planning for the family. You must take culture into account of how you're going to lay out a service plan to address those safety issues but still respect the culture. Many of the reports we get around child abuse and neglect are really families with multiple problems. The big 3 are domestic violence, substance abuse, and mental illness, and those links to child abuse and neglect. It is very important that professionals in those fields call us when a child's being abused or neglected, call us when they have concerns about a parent who is a victim of domestic violence or is using substances or has a mental illness that could affect the safety of the child, that they call us and then work with us to resolve those issues.
Myth number 6. Children lie about abuse, and reporters cannot be certain about what really happened.
You know how kids lie, exaggerate about everything. I mean, who's to say the kid was really experiencing child abuse? I mean, it's happened to me more than one occasion where
What,
a
you mean
child
like
was-
Michael, your friend, who's always lying about how people treat him? I know,
Yeah.
it's bad.
You know, he was mad at his mom, and she
He goes over the top to explain the story.
yeah says that she was hitting him and whipping him and you know, none of that was true. He later admitted none of it was true.
Yeah.
And so
Well, I especially believe it on teenagers because teenagers are always mad because of the
Hormonal.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the
Craziness,
rules, and they don't want to
It's like
follow
you-
that.
yeah, you can't really
so you
trust
know they're
them.
gonna lie.
Yeah.
Most children don't lie about abuse and neglect. There are some that do. If they're working with somebody that they know has a history of lying, but they still suspect abuse or neglect, they need to call in. And then it really is the requirement of the agency to do the thorough enough investigation to determine whether or not there has been a lie on the part of the child or not. It's not the mandated reporter's responsibility. If they suspect it, they need to report it in.
Even if this child is known to us as someone who makes up stories, it is in our own protection as an advocate. It covers us on liability to pass that story on. Even if this is the 1 in 1,000 times the child is telling the truth, we have a responsibility to make that report. Never ask a child why they let the abuse go on so long, because that implied they had the ability to stop it, and they absolutely didn't. We could be shocked to hear it's been going on for years, but we should never ask the child why they let it go on so long. We, as the first reporter, should always believe the child. There are trained investigators that will find out whether or not every detail is true. If a child makes an allegation, there's something clinically going on in that family that requires intervention. It may not be full-blown child abuse, it may not need the courts and the legal system, but something's going on that led a child to make that statement.
Myth number 7. Reporting child abuse is sometimes experienced as a betrayal of children who believe they made disclosures in confidence.
I had a student who came up to me and she confided in me of how her dad was treating her.
It was a secret. Oh.
Yeah, is your dad mad at you? What's going on? Did it make things worse?
Yes.
Oh, Brittany. She was betrayed. She felt like I had betrayed her. Now, what do you do?
Well, at the beginning of each of my classes, I let all the students know that there's a limit to what kind of information they can tell me to where I won't go report it. So if it's serious enough, then I will say something, and they know that.
If a child comes to you and says, I've got a secret, and I'm only going to tell you if you promise not to tell, don't agree with the child. What you can say to the child is, if you share with me something where I think you need help, I'm going to reach out and get you the help you need. Don't let a child convince you to keep a secret that you are morally and ethically and legally obliged to share. Tell them the truth and they will come back to you because they know that you're going to help them.
How are you?
Good.
Are things better?
Yeah, I'm glad you talked to them because now I've got closer with my dad.
Good, that's great. So he's getting counseling?
Yeah, and he stopped drinking.
That's great, Brittany.
Most
See?
children are not aware of the best way to keep themselves safe. They count on adults to do that, and I believe there's very specific reasons why they choose to confide in someone. But I also think it's very important for the investigator to be trained on how you engage the child and work with the person who made the report so the child doesn't feel betrayed, but in fact that we're there to help.
Myth number 8. I'll let somebody else in the department handle this. I don't have the time, the authority, or training to make a report.
So honestly, I think that we should go to the principal, go to somebody that's higher up than us before we get involved and let them take care of the issue because they're more equipped to do so.
True, but it's not taking responsibility. You know, I see what you're saying, but you're telling someone else to take care of something that you probably should.
No, you can go to the principal and say, this is an issue, take care of it. You do not have to get involved. okay?
Right.
Not fill out all the paperwork, let them do it. They have to do it anyway.
Probably have more experience than we do anyway. So.
I know that agencies have set up their own protocols, but from everything that I understand, that doesn't take away the responsibility that the actual mandated reporter has to bring that information forward to the Child Protection Agency. So hospitals may have protocols that say the physician isn't to report directly, they delegate it to the nurse and the nurse reports in. Or in a group home, maybe the staff don't make a report, they have to call their supervisor and the supervisor makes a report.
We rely heavily and most importantly on experts with eyes. And these are the places that kids sometimes will show up for their routine care, for their vaccinations, school exams, whatever it takes. They have the opportunity to see children in a way that most people do not. They have their abilities to take clothes off and examine and really see impacts of abuse. And so we would really encourage them to please overcome barriers. We're trying to make it as user-friendly as we can, but please call these things in. Please don't turn your back to them because they are vital. These will change people's lives if we let them go.
I believe this is an issue it's very tough for a child welfare agency to get in the middle of. However, I know that if I were a teacher and somebody told me not to report and they took a job action against me because I did, I have the law on my side, and the law mandates you to report, and we must protect children from abuse or neglect.
Myth number 9. It is not necessary to report if parents agree to participate in counseling.
You know what? I also had a student whose parents was going to counseling, getting counseling for their anger and stuff. And why do you have to file a report if their parents are already taking care of the issue?
Well, you want to have some kind of record of it that they're going to the counseling, or it could just get worse, you know? I mean,
well, how I feel about it is if they've already learned their lesson and they know they did something wrong, why are we going to punish them if they're going to try to fix it? And
some people might think that by talking a family into going to counseling, they've fulfilled their responsibility. That's just not the case. Good counseling is painful. Good counseling is time-consuming. Good counseling takes a lot of effort, and most parents are not going to stick with it to the point of the family getting healthy without the push of the Child Protective Services system. But on a more practical level, that has not covered the reporter's responsibility to make that report into the child protection system.
We must ensure the child's safety. We have monitoring systems in place. We also have access to a wider variety of services, a wider array that may be necessary to address other problems that aren't so apparent in the family. So the fact that a parent's agreed to get counseling or go to drug and alcohol treatment does not negate the requirement to make a report to the hotline.
New challenges, the electronic age, changing attitudes about sex and morality, plus the effects of mass immigration pose new challenges to us as a society.
Blended families are very, very common in our society right now. Research is showing that the presence of a step-parent or a parental paramour in the family unit can be a higher predictor for the possibility of abuse. A step-parent, a parent's paramour, doesn't have that bond with the child that a natural parent has. A step-parent arrives on the scene and meets a 14-year-old. They have no memory of changing that 14-year-old's diaper when she was 14 days old. The boundaries become easier to blur, particularly when there's stress in the adult relationship. So support for kids that are part of blended families is critical. Every community has got people from a variety of different cultural backgrounds, and within the cultural backgrounds, you're going to have different norms about parenting. Some of the norms from some cultures, for example, leaving children alone for long periods of time, might be perfectly acceptable in that particular cultural group, but in this day and age might be considered abuse or neglect. It is still appropriate to make a report when we see something happening that places a child in danger. It is up to the Child Protective Services folks to provide that family with the remedial information to help keep the child safe in this culture and in this environment.
Hey, Shanae.
Hey, how are you?
Good. What you doing?
I'm writing this essay for English class about crystals or something. I don't know. I'm having trouble with it.
That looks boring to me.
It is.
How's
Could you
that?
help me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I need help with my first sentence, but it's all confusing.
Huh. Yeah.
When we're in the upper grades and we have relatively young teachers teaching relatively older kids, middle and high school kids, it's so easy for those lines to get blurred between teacher and student. We're seeing this now, the generation that considers oral sex as third base are now in the classrooms. What do we need to watch for to make sure that our schools are safe and that the casual attitude that came in with some of the younger teachers doesn't permeate down to going on between the teachers and the students? That's becoming more and more of a concern now, is making sure that we maintain those appropriate boundaries between the teachers and students, particularly with the younger, newer teachers.
The clergy are mandated reporters when they relate in the role of a counselor or a treatment person, not in the role of being a minister or a member of the clergy. And very often people will go to the clergy for counseling and intervention when they have problems. In that regard, they are mandated reporters as well. Under circumstances, say, such as a confession, they are not mandated reporters.
From my experience working in the field, Child Protective Services workers, like every profession, some people are fabulous, some people aren't as good, but most of them are good, solid, get the job done. Don't be afraid to make the report. If you have the bad luck of finding the brand new worker who doesn't know her way yet, or the 30-year worker who's got one foot out the door, call the supervisor. The overwhelming majority of folks that have made child protection their career are excellent at what they do, and find someone in your community that can help you meet the needs of the kids.
We have two great speakers today. One's Dr. Steve Ambrose and the other's Patricia Del Valle. They're going to be speaking to you today on child abuse. Okay. Dr. Steve Ambrose.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be here with you. My name is Steve Ambrose, and I'm a psychologist, and I work at a place called Children's Institute, where we specialize in working with kids who've been sexually abused, physically abused, all different forms of child maltreatment, and with their families. We have a variety of different
programs. Mario? Mario? Something wrong?
Just leave me alone. Just leave Mario, stop. What's the matter? Mario, what's wrong? Was something said in there that bothered you? What? Talk about it. Please tell me what's the matter.
Okay, my boyfriend, he abuses the baby. I don't know what to do.
Are you afraid of him? Has he threatened you before? Mario, you know I have to report this. I'm mandated by law. Okay? I'm sorry. We have to do this, and you have to understand this is to protect you and the baby.
Yes, good morning. My name is Irma Torres. I'm calling from the Roland Unified School District, and I need to report a suspected child abuse. Today, one of our students told me that her baby's dad has been yelling at the baby, hitting the baby.
One of the mistakes that I think teachers and educators, other mandated reporters really need to avoid is promising a child that you're going to keep something that they tell you secret. We just can't do that. If the child tells us something that needs to be reported, we're going to need to report it, and we're going to need to break that promise. So we're better off not making that promise. And in fact, we're even better off letting kids know from the beginning what the limits are to confidentiality. Certainly in mental health professionals who see kids in therapy, I mean, that's the very first thing that they let their kids know, is that they would have to report abuse or neglect. But I think it's wise for teachers and school counselors and so forth to also let kids know that.
Shade, you're doing the right thing telling me about this, and it's very brave for you to come forward. And what he did was a terrible thing. And we're going to get you some help, and we're going to put a stop to him ever doing that to anybody ever again, okay? Okay. Well, at the beginning of each of my classes, I let all the students know that there's a limit to what kind of information they can tell me to where I won't go report it. So if it's serious enough, then I will say something, and they know that.
The decision of a professional to decide whether to tell the person they're making a report is a difficult one. Most of the time my answer would be yes. However, there are situations where there's some concern that the family may flee before the state agency or the police get out there, or that the child may be harmed in an additional way before we get out there. In those situations, I would say, no, don't tell them.